Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome, panelists. The first question well, more of an introductory statement is I'd like you to all introduce yourselves, state who your supervisor was, and when you completed your honors.
Kari, would you be willing to start? It's up to you.
Sure. Are we taking our cameras off or on again?
For the cameras, do we want them on while we're talking?
It is up to you.
Oh, okay. Sounds good.
Yeah. Either way, whichever you're comfortable with.
Kari's is on.
Sounds good. Do you want to go first, Kiran?
Sure. So, hi everyone. My name is Kiran, and I did my honors last year. And Kari and Mario, and I think there was one more honors student that was here. You're right. Jackie, we were all in the same honors class, and I did my project with Dr. Farhad Dastur and Eric Ma, who is a master's student at the University of Victoria.
All right, I'll go next. So my name is Kari Walton. Like Kiran said, we did our honors program at the same time. So we did ours starting in September 2019 and we ended in April of 2020. My supervisor was Dr. Corey Peterson. And my thesis focused on heterosexual men's motivations for engaging in a form of street harassment known as catcalling.
I guess I'm next. So my name's Jackie. And yeah, I was classmates with Kari, Kiran, and oh gosh, one second. I did my honors project under the supervision of Dr. Gira Bat, and we were doing a cultural study about acculturative stress in Filipino Canadians.
Okay, so hi everybody. You can't see my face because I don't have a camera on this computer, but I'm Mario. So yeah, like everybody said, I was in the same honors cohort as Kari, Kiran, and Jackie. My supervisor was Dr. Kevin Hamilton, and my honors thesis was on comparing different kinds of signage on impact on the performance of people on a recycling sorting task.
Wonderful. And right. Shayna, maybe, I don't know, to talk a little bit about some of your previous honors students or something along those lines.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Shayna Rusticus, faculty representative here. So this is my third year of supervising honors students. I currently have 3 students for this year. And yeah, I guess we've done a variety of different projects. So we've got this year have a program evaluation on undergrad psych courses, looking at a meta-analysis of masculinity and femininity. Previous project was on self-talk and video game performance, or cell phone use and addiction. So I've covered a variety of different topics.
Okay, excellent. So the next question is, what does honors involve? More specifically, what's the type of studying you have to do? What are the class requirements? What's an honors defense like? And if you want, we can go in the order, Kari, Kiran, Jackie, Mario, Shaina, if that would be easier for everyone.
Sounds good. All right, so the honors program, it's a 2-semester long program. So during the first semester, there's a class, which includes weekly meetings, lots of discussions. You'll have quite a few assignments and some presentations as well. And the assignments are very relevant and useful. So it's great that they're there, but they're also quite challenging. So you do have to expect to work pretty hard. You'll present your research project plan to your cohort a couple of times throughout the term. So it doesn't have to be overly formal, but you'll kind of be presenting to them your ideas and like what you have constructed so far as you go. And yeah, by the end of the first semester, you'll have completed your research proposal for your study. So that includes like writing your literature review and your methods section, along with your like expected results for your study. And then that will be graded by your supervisor. And then the second semester is kind of finishing up your study. There's no class for the second half of honors. So you're just kind of responsible for working with your supervisor to kind of finish up that study and complete writing the paper.
Do any of you have anything else to add? That was a pretty thorough response.
Yeah, I can add to it. It's probably not much different from what Kari has already said, but just to reiterate that the first semester is probably more busier than the second one, given that there is a class portion where you do have assignments and presentations that you prepare for on top of meeting with your supervisor and developing your research design and ideas. And I think the first semester is very critical because that's when you start not just start developing your ideas, but that's when a lot of the changes start happening before you can collect data. And a lot of students in this time, especially during our cohort, we had quite a few people who did pilot studies in the first semester before they went on into actually collecting data. I know Shayna's student and our colleague Brittany Stobie, she did a mixed method. So the first half was working with focus groups in the semester, and then in the second half, she had collected data online. So yeah, first semester can definitely be a lot busier.
And so the second semester is more so about data collection, analyzing that data, and having it prepared for the honors defense. And we, of course, had it a little bit different because of coronavirus. So our defense was online, much like this, actually. It looked a lot like this, except we had our slides available and everything like that. And so for the first half of your presentation, it's a lot about just talking about your project and what you did and discussing the results. And the second half of your presentation is a Q&A session. So people in the comments, or if they want to get on the mic, will ask you questions about your project, which can be kind of scary. But by the end of that semester, you know your project inside out, and so you'll be able to answer those questions pretty easy.
I guess then for me, I can talk a little bit about the assignments that we did in the first semester. So it depends really on how Dr. Bernstein is going to structure a class for your cohort. But for us, we did ours, like, let's see. So we had a grant proposal assignment where we had to write a, well, like a grant proposal according to the standards of one of the research grants that we had to look up online and had to write for our own study as we're submitting it to that grant. And that was good practice for actually writing for, research grants in like, what was it called again? Uh, Guys, what was the name of the research grant that we applied for?
It was called Shirk.
Yeah, CERC. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good practice for writing for CERC. We also had to do a what was it? A thesis defense observation. So we actually had to go and go to someone else's thesis defense. It doesn't have to be at this school because we don't have graduate degrees here. So you have to go somewhere like UBC or SFU and just sit in on someone defending their master's or PhD, and then you've got to observe um, their study and give some critiques on how they conducted their study and what you might give suggestions for improvement. And that was a really great opportunity to see how thesis defense is conducted before you're the one who's actually up there, has to do the defending. Um, and oh yeah, and think Jackie mentioned a bit, but you also had to do presentations constantly in order to, as you're developing your ideas, you have to provide presentations to explain what your current idea for your study is. So I think we did 3 presentations over the course of the first semester. And so those are really helpful for not only just explaining how you think that your study is going to go, but also getting your cohort's feedback on where you think you should improve, what possible design flaws are there. Those were really helpful for developing our studies ideas, I think. Let's see. I think what else am I missing? Oh, and also at the end of the first semester, you also have to do a thesis proposal defense. I think Dr. Bernstein mentioned that in the chat. So that's like your defense of your final proposal. That's your final presentation of your proposal to work out any details left before you submit it. And at the end of the second semester, you have to do a defense of your entire thesis, which is just like trying to justify like the approaches that you had to take and address any questions that people in the audience might have. Okay, I think that's all I got.
Excellent. Shane, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I guess I can just speak a little bit about the supervisor kind of role. So during the time, both the first and the second term, you'll be meeting with your supervisor on a regular basis. So for me, I have a regular weekly meeting with each of my students, and that time is just set aside to check in, to discuss any issues, or to talk about the next steps. If it wasn't needed, then we could just cancel, or if we needed to meet more often, then we would meet more often. But there would always be that weekly time slot as an opportunity to check in during the entire honors.
Excellent. So our next question is discussing the idea of how you came up with your honors theses. So you can briefly talk about what your honors thesis was, and did you and your supervisor agree right away? What was the experience of finding a middle ground between your supervisor? And is it what your supervisor wanted, or was it more of what you wanted? And Shayna can talk about her experience from the other side as well.
All right. So my project, like I mentioned before, was on catcalling. So I was looking at men's motivations for engaging in catcalling. And then we also compared two groups of men who did report engaging in catcalling and men who didn't. And then we compared them on measures of sexism, masculinity, social dominance, and their attitudes towards sexual harassment. So I worked with Corey Peterson. I knew that I wanted to work with her like well ahead of time because I had taken some courses with her before, and I knew that we had definitely very overlapping interests. So it was very easy for me to come up with an idea that her and I were both on the same page about, both really excited about. One thing that I did ahead of time when I was prepping to go into honors was I started thinking about different options that I was interested in, so that when I did eventually have that conversation with her, I would have a few ideas that I could put forth, and then she could let me know what she was interested in out of my list, and then we could kind of agree on a topic that way. So I found that to be a pretty good approach, because then you don't end up doing something that you're not interested in, and you can both have a shared interest in that. In terms of finding a middle ground, yeah, for me it was really easy to find something that we were both into. So that was really smooth sailing for me.
I guess I'm next. So like Kari, I think things were pretty smooth sailing for myself as well, in the sense that my supervisor was very open to anything I really wanted to do. I was unsure in the beginning. I knew I wanted to do something regarding virtual reality. I knew it was a very novel topic. So I did go around and ask a series of faculty members inquiring about if they were interested in doing a project with virtual reality, and Farhad did seem as it was the best fit because he was very, very knowledgeable about it. So I did end up doing my project with virtual reality, and it was a materials validation study. And simply put, because it was 4 experiments, we wanted to basically see what the misinformation effect looks like in real life. And the misinformation effect basically happens when our memory is altered due to the exposure of misleading information. So things were definitely subject to change for my project because it was a materials validation study. I developed my own materials. I filmed my own video that was used for the study. And then I edited it. So there were a lot of things that were subject to change, including the actual materials that were used in the project and the research design. But just to go back and reiterate on my own experience, I think that's why the first semester was very helpful, because we would all have things to discuss in class about our projects, and I could go in and say, these are my materials, this is what I have done, what are your thoughts on this, from my cohort. So that I found very helpful, on top of discussing with my supervisor and making changes.
Right. So I also didn't have too much of a problem trying to figure out what my project was going to be about. And that's because the supervisor that I chose, Gira, was very open to, again, whatever I really wanted to do. Her, I guess, motto going into this was, this is your project. I'm just here to support you. So whatever I really wanted to do, she would back me up. She would just provide me with the materials that I needed, or give me some suggestions about what materials I should use or what kind of materials I should use. So basically, we agreed right away. We didn't have too much of an issue trying to find that middle ground because we were already there. So I didn't have too much of an issue. And yeah, so we worked pretty well together in the end.
Oh, Jackie, didn't you also say beforehand that you didn't know Gira, you never took a class with her beforehand, but you picked her because she
Right.
had the most expertise in your topic?
Exactly. So, as opposed to like Kari's experience where she had met Corey beforehand and took a bunch of classes with her, I had never had a class with Gira before. So this was my first experience working with Gira, and there were times where we did have to figure out what our working relationship was going to be like, because we didn't have that experience beforehand. But we ended up working it out in the end, and I'm actually taking classes with her now, past honors. So it's been a really interesting experience.
And Mario?
Okay, so my supervisor was Dr. Kevin Hamilton. So yeah, similar to Kari's, I took classes with him beforehand. I really liked him as a professor, and I also liked his subject area, which is in human factors. Uh, so I picked him as my supervisor first before wanting to get, or before picking a topic. From what I've heard in the honors program, most people who have taken it before, as their advice to me, told me that to pick a supervisor based on how well you work together, more than your topic. Because some supervisors are willing to like venture a little bit outside of their research area comfort zone. Uh, so even if they don't have specific expertise in the topic you want to study, that might still be okay. But of course, it still is best to pick one who is an expert in what you want to study. So, but yeah, the number one thing they recommend was have a positive working relationship first. So that's why I picked my supervisor. I did have a few ideas in mind when I first went to go meet him to discuss possible research ideas before the honors program started. When in our first meeting, we didn't really come up with a definitive idea yet. I just threw around some of the things I was thinking of, but then it was just like suddenly when I was out in the world, I saw like some this like new kind of recycling signage, and I thought that's what I want to study. So I just kind of had like a light bulb moment there, and that's what I picked.
All right, I will go next. I just want to echo some of the things that Mario said, with the two kind of big things being the working relationship with your supervisor, and then kind of the match in terms of the topic and expertise in the topic. So I am generally fairly open to the topics that my students have wanted to work on, and 4 of my 5 students have picked the topics themselves, and then I will just kind of steer or guide them in terms of the methods or in terms of thinking it through. But that said, based on experiences from this term, is I have kind of come to realize more how important it is to have that expertise in a particular area. I want to be flexible. I want to be there to support students. I love supervising students. It's, a really great opportunity with this honors program and this opportunity to do this kind of research and to work in this kind of a relationship. But just to give an example from this current term, as I had a student, we had agreed on a topic. I had kind of familiarity and some experience in that topic. But as going through the first semester and you're doing all the aspects of the course, this topic ended up morphing and changing into something that ended up being a little bit outside of my realm. And I will say that I had, that I noticed that. And so it's kind of a lesson learned to me, is that it is important to have that fit between what I can bring as a supervisor and what the student is wanting to work in. So you do, working relationship important, but you do have to have that match in terms of topic and experience as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, sorry, I
Oh,
did think of
no,
a little
go
bit
ahead.
more. So I also, one of the people that I spoke to before who also did the honors program previously. So for hers, she went into her honors cohort with a totally different topic than the one that she ended up with, just because, yeah, she wasn't sure exactly what she wanted to study. So she just picked something that she was kind of interested in. But then over the course of the honors program, she it just she caught on to something that she was way more interested in, and she decided to shift that as her research topic. So yeah, it's okay if you don't have an idea at the beginning, because the first semester is kind of meant to help develop what ideas you want to study. But that being said, though, it's obviously much easier if you know exactly what you want to study at the beginning, because then if you do a complete retool of your uh, study idea, where it's a completely different topic area, then that means you might have to do more revising of your already drafted research proposal. So yeah, like having to do a new literature review, for example. So yeah, it's not the end of the world if you don't have one, but it is much harder.
Great. We're going to move on to our next question. And it has to do with deciding what to do for honors in regards to finding a supervisor. So, can the panelists walk us through what are your process of finding a supervisor? Like, when did you start asking people, and did you ask multiple people? And Shane, if you want, you can go through like how many students typically ask you when it comes to honors, or are there students that don't quite fit your style and you might refer to them to someone else? And you can start with Kari.
Awesome. So in terms of picking a supervisor and how that process went, like I mentioned before, I knew exactly who I wanted to work with for more than a year before I started the program. So I was very confident about my choice because I knew that she had the similar research interests. So, I mean, I had a plan kind of going into it, but not all students do. I think I asked her to supervise me in about mid-December. So on the earlier side, I don't know if that's the average for the other students, but that's when I reached out to her. And I felt that like the earlier that I asked, the better the chances are that she would be willing to take me on as a student, because if you wait too long, then they might have other students that have already asked them and they might not be able to take on any more students. So I would obviously say that asking earlier is probably better if you want to kind of get your foot in the door sort of thing. I think the deadline to apply for honors is in early March. So yeah, I gave myself quite a bit of time there, but yeah, it's never too early, I don't think. I didn't ask multiple people because I did get accepted by Corey when I initially asked her, but it's totally normal to do that if you aren't 100% sure who you want to work with, or if one person does say that they can't take on another student. It's completely common for people to ask multiple supervisors. And yes, I did have experience working with her, like I said, and taken some of her classes. I do feel like you would probably have better chances being accepted by a professor that you do know, because it kind of gives them a little bit more to go off of. They kind of know your working style and what your kind of grades are like ahead of time. So I think that was an advantage for me, because she didn't have to kind of worry about like what kind of student I was, so to speak. So it is a good idea to have a little bit of experience with them beforehand. And if you don't have any classes with them, you can always like ask to speak with them in their office hours, or try to form a little bit of a bond and get to know them a bit before you consider asking them, if you think that that could be helpful.
Excellent. Kiran?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Kari had said. I mean, if there's a supervisor that you know that you want to work with, and you've taken classes with them, and you have developed that working relationship, I think that might be a place to start. But that was actually not the case for me. So again, I knew I wanted to do something with virtual reality, wasn't exactly sure who I wanted to work with and what I wanted to do, because it's a very broad area of work. So I went around and I asked a few faculty members and inquired about what their background was and if they were interested in supervising. So yeah, and I think even talking to supervisors is helpful because there might be something else that you may have been interested in, or might have been an additional topic. So if for whatever reason, like Kari was saying, there's a supervisor you wanted to work with who has already taken on a certain number of students and can't do any more, you might have an alternative option of working with somebody else. So yeah, I would encourage any future or anybody who wants to do honors going later on, or who will be applying, to ask around, ask questions. There may be something that you might find more interesting. In terms of the whole process of meeting with my supervisor, when I knew that I wanted to work with Farhad and my other supervisor, Eric Ma, we had started quite early in developing my thesis, and it was only until later on that I realized my honors thesis was turning into a pilot, because there were quite a few experiments, and due to COVID, it was kind of halted at my third experiment, and I could only run online. And so if you know what you want to do and you know the person that you want to work with, I would encourage trying to get started and knowing your ideas as soon as possible. And it's okay if that changes as well. But I think the benefit of that is that you've done all of the reading, you know what you're interested in, what you want to do, and your supervisor is guiding you into the direction that would be the most feasible project for honors.
Okay, so like I mentioned before, I had no prior working experience with my supervisor. But I knew I wanted to do a cultural study. And I knew that in the past there weren't too many that were done. And there were only 2 professors at our school who actually work with cultural research. And so I really only had 2 options. And so I went and I actually talked to both of them. One of them was previously my sister's supervisor. And so I would have preferred to work with somebody else. And that's how I ended up meeting Gira. And through my first meeting with Gira, she actually had told me that you don't need to work with me. If I want you to do a little bit more reading about your project, about what you want to look at exactly, and if you change directions and you think that at the end of your little literature review, you think that I might not be the best fit for you, that's okay. You can move on to somebody else. And that was our first meeting. And so I did do a little bit more research. I looked into it. I met her again, and I had a little bit more of a fleshed out idea of what I wanted to do. And from that point on, she's like, okay, I like that idea. Let's work together then. And so that's how we ended up coming together. Another thing is I also had to send her, because I had no classes with her prior to this, she wanted to see my transcripts. So I did have to give her my transcripts because we had no working relationship before this. She wanted to see what my grades were like to kind of figure out if she was willing to take me on, if I had basically the work ethic that she wanted me to have. And so that was another thing. If you haven't had prior experience with the prof, they might want to look at your grades too, just to make sure that they want to work with you. But that was only in my situation. Other profs, they might be a little bit different in looking at the criteria that they want for a student. But I asked her in January. So I felt like I was late compared to the other people in our cohort, because they had already began talking to their supervisors or trying to figure out who they wanted as a supervisor in late November, and then they started asking in December. And so I felt like I was a little bit late coming into January, and then I was asking. So like the other two just said, maybe ask a little bit earlier because you don't know if you'll be able to get a spot.
Mario?
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah. So, like I mentioned before, I had already selected who I wanted to have as my honor supervisor beforehand, based on having previous classes with him and also being interested in the subject that he uh, has his expertise in. So, I don't remember exactly when I started asking him, but so one thing that you have to do on the honors application is that you have to state which one is your, or which professor is going to be your honors supervisor. So I emailed Dr. Hamilton before I made my application, and so we could like talk about all the details. In the email, when, he immediately accepted, so I didn't have to worry about selecting a multiple supervisors. And yeah, our meeting was just about discussing potential research ideas. I don't remember when it was. I think it was well before the deadline. So, I have no idea. But let's see. So as for the other questions, like, are you free to change your mind if your first choice wasn't a good choice? I don't think I've heard about anyone changing their research supervisor midway through. Um, I mean, I assume it does happen, but I haven't heard of that happening yet, though.
All right. I guess I will say that the majority of the students that I have supervised have come from my research lab. So for those faculty who do have research labs, and if you're interested in working with that individual and you're not in their lab, you probably want to ask them sooner rather than later, because they may be more likely to get asked by multiple students. In terms of timing, I've been asked almost a year in advance by one student, or in the fall prior to. I've also been asked, almost kind of right before the deadline. And so for me, it's kind of varied in terms of when I've been asked. I've also met with a number of students who were kind of, looking around for potential supervisors and just kind of having a chat with them about topic areas or just kind of work styles. So I do encourage you to, think about multiple people that you might want to work with and meet and chat with those people and just kind of talk about ideas, talk about what your expectations would be in terms of working together. But I would say it seems like the honors is becoming, more and more students seem to be interested in the honors program. It is filling up. And so because of that, you probably do want to try and talk to a faculty member sooner rather than later, because I think there's going to be a lot more students out there that are looking for supervisors. And so a supervisor, can only take on so many students as well. And so if they kind of have agreed to already take on a certain number of students, and even if they would love to work with you, it might be too late because they can't take anybody else on. So really, it probably is better to, if you haven't already been talking to a faculty member now, you probably want to do that pretty soon.
Oh, sorry, I also just thought something else again. So, one thing also that Jackie kind of mentioned is that she spoke to just all the prospective professors in her research area. Well, there's only two, but so even though I selected my first pick and my first pick accepted immediately, I did talk to one other professor who was in like that area of like sustainable psychology that was related to my research topic. Um, and also because he was the supervisor of one of the people that I talked to who was formerly in the honors program. And so um, speaking to this other professor was really helpful as well to help, even though I wasn't going to select him as my supervisor, he still helped me flesh out some of my ideas on how I was going to go about doing my study. And he even helped like share some early drafts of his previous honor students' research proposal. And that was helpful to look at to see how like what the format of a research proposal is. So asking around, even if they're not going to take you up as their honors student, is still helpful because you still get like that early feedback on how to go about your study.
Okay, we have an additional question for Dr. Bernstein. And the question is, have you ever had an honors student who had to switch supervisors for any reason?
Okay. We have not had that happen once the student had enrolled in the program and had started the first term, the fall term. I can't recall having a student switch honors supervisors at that point. I'd have to think a little bit more about it. But as the students have already noted here, several students have changed their minds very close to the start of that fall term. But I don't remember any of them switching once they had already started the fall term. We've had students drop out of the program. Most of them do complete, actually the vast majority complete. But as the students have already noted, it's a commitment. You're signing on for a lot of work. That fall term is a ton of work. That course is a 6-credit course, and you earn every credit of it. And the spring term is also 6 credits, but by that point you're really doing your research project and writing it up and analyzing data, etc. But if, to my knowledge, I can't recall any students switching supervisors once they had enrolled in the fall term of the program.
Excellent, thank you. So we have the next couple of questions are to do with the application process, and it should be noted that usually the application deadline is early March, but this year it is extended for May 7th due to circumstances. So the first question is, if a student doesn't reach a requirement, what should they do, and how should they fill out the paperwork?
I don't remember what the forms looked like off the top of my head, but I do know that it is possible for students who don't reach the requirements to be accepted into the program. I think it mostly depends on how many other students have applied. So if there are a lot of other students who want to get into honors and they do reach the requirements, they would probably get those spots ahead of an individual who does not. But it's always worth a shot. You never know, right? So if you are currently enrolled in one of the prerequisite courses, I think that's okay. Like if you're taking research methods 2 or statistics or whatever those courses that you need to get into honors, I think you can still apply for honors even if you're still currently taking that course. Yeah, that's all I remember off the top of my head.
I can speak a little more to this because I'm one of those people who did not meet the requirements. And I can say that from personal experience that I think I agree with Kari in the sense that it really does depend on the pool of people that are applying. You know, if everybody does end up meeting the requirements and there are only, at the time that we applied, there were only 10 seats. So if everybody met the requirements, then I probably wouldn't have gotten in. But I also had a supervisor who was willing to vouch for my past research experience and my grades, which met the requirements for upper level research methods and upper level stats. So I did meet those requirements, but I just had, I think I was a few points below in GPA. Like I think you need a 3.3 and I had a 3.1 something cumulatively. But if you make a case and you're able to show that, you know, these were the circumstances at the time and you're able to explicitly state why this was the case, then I think it's much easier for your supervisor to help you or advocate for you before they reach a decision. So, for example, my first year wasn't the best year because I had extenuating circumstances, but also the courses that did drop my GPA were like intro to biology or intro to math. And then I did end up retaking those courses at some point. But there were courses like that But when I did show the other part of my transcripts that had all of my psych courses, and the GPA was above the requirement that was needed. So as long as you're able to make a case and show that you are willing and you know that you really want to do honors and this is how you can explain your case, then I think it's possible. But just be wary of, that it depends on the number of people that apply.
Yeah, just to reiterate what everybody else is saying, it depends on the competitiveness of your cohort. So we had 10 seats. We ended up only having, I think our cohort was like 8 people. 8? Yeah. I don't quite remember. But we actually had less people actually get in. And so I don't think we had that big of a pool that applied during our cohort. But that being said, honors is getting really, really popular lately. And people are really wanting to take honors nowadays. So it's, yeah, you might want to have a professor that's going to vouch for you in the end.
Okay, so yeah, for mine, so well, I met the requirements, so there's nothing really for me like in that way. My yeah, I think someone in the chat said that there's if you don't meet the X requirement, then you have to put in a little explanation for why, and you also have to put in a little explanation for how you're going to meet those requirements. Like, what's your plan to meet those requirements? So for mine, like I was slightly below the B grade you required for stats, so I retook it in time to do the honors application. But I also do know from a couple people who went through honors. So Tina, she was a former honors student, and she didn't have good enough stats grades, so she still applied into honors anyway, got in with, and she just retook stats alongside the first semester, and that was that was the deal that she got. So obviously, yeah, that's more work to do on top of all the work you had to do for honors, so that's not ideal, but there can be exceptions made. I also know another former honors student who, similar thing with research methods, her exception was even greater because there wasn't actually a available slot for research methods done in the first semester of the honors cohort that she was doing. So they actually made a special section just for her, where she was the only student where she could do research methods so that she could do honors. So yeah, so exceptions can be made for you depending on like the strength of your overall application if you don't meet one of the requirements. But yeah, it depends on how competitive it is. Don't count on an exception being made for you, essentially.
Yeah, so typically there are 10 spots that are available in the honors program. And as far as I know, up until last year, those 10 spots haven't been filling. And so if you didn't quite meet requirements, you're encouraged to apply, and the committee would then consider your application. Even if there were spots and you didn't quite make requirements, doesn't guarantee that you would get one of those spots. But the committee would discuss your particular case and that you may end up getting into the program. However, last year, there were lots of applicants for the honors. We had 10 that were met all qualifications, and then we had, a handful that not quite meeting qualifications, but had also applied. And we were able to get, 3 extra spots for this current year. Maybe we might be able to get more spots for the next cohort as well, but there's no guarantee on that. I am anticipating it's going to be another competitive year. My guess is that there will be more than 10 applicants, but I would still encourage, if you don't quite have everything that you need, to still apply anyway. But as everybody said, just be aware it will be competitive, and it's going to depend on how many people have applied and how many have met those requirements.
Excellent. That was answered very well. We have a small question for Dr. Bernstein, and how are students going to know if they've been accepted or not?
Honor students get a letter from the department once they've been admitted, and that letter usually comes late May. So this year, the deadline has been extended to May 7th. I suspect that in future years, it will also be later, around May. In the past, we decided that it was too early to ask students to apply in March, especially if the honors committee doesn't meet until May, which is what we've been doing the last 5 or more years. So going forward, we'll probably keep the deadline closer to May. The committee then meets in May to discuss and select the application, among the applicants who to admit. And then once those decisions are made, the students are notified. So by the end of May, probably early June at the latest. I also wanted to just kind of as a adding on to what everybody else has already said about whether you should apply, how competitive the program is. If you meet requirements and you're interested in the honors program, apply. No questions, just apply. Make sure you find somebody who is interested in supervising you. That's critical. But if you've got somebody who's willing to supervise you, you meet all the requirements, and you're interested in honors, apply. If you have somebody who's willing to supervise you and you do not meet all the requirements, but you're close, and your supervisor, your potential supervisor is willing to go to bat for you, definitely apply. If you are not very close, if you got a GPA below 3.0, but you are otherwise you just really, really, really want to do honors, come talk to me before you apply. All right. I would probably not encourage students who are below 3.0 to apply to the honors program, especially given how competitive it's becoming. As Shayna said, we're seeing a lot of really good quality applicants, and I suspect that the quality is just going to improve going forward, and the numbers are going to increase going forward, the number of applicants. That doesn't mean you should be discouraged. It means that you should be proactive. If you're attending this meeting, you are being proactive, which is great. But yeah, so that's hopefully answers the question and gets some other stuff off my chest as well.
Okay. Next question is to do with workload. We've already kind of addressed this, and we can ask more briefly if you would like. What is the workload like? Is it manageable? What are some struggles that you had? Is there a time commitment? And what are some skills to make the class more manageable?
Yes, I think this is an important thing to discuss as well, because everybody handles workload differently. So it can be hard to say how challenging this program is going to be for each individual. But I can say for myself, I had an older sister who went through the honors program, and she struggled with it quite a lot, and she's a great A+ student, and I'm an A student as well, and I also struggled with the program quite a bit. So in terms of the workload, I would say it's heavy, and I would say comfortably that it's quite heavy. It's difficult more so in the first semester, like we mentioned before, because you do have to balance designing your study, prepping everything, and writing your proposal with the class itself, which I think is a lot of work. So you can anticipate that the second semester will be a little bit lighter. But for myself, I took one other course alongside honors because I knew going into it that it was going to be pretty busy, and I was still busy, and I only had that one other course, which was quite an easy one at that. So if you're thinking about taking honors with three other courses, you're probably going to be drowning, I would anticipate. And we did have a girl in our cohort who did that, and she was not having a good time. So I think it's fair to say that if you can, and if you have the opportunity to do so, I would consider taking fewer courses alongside honors if possible. We kind of went over already what kinds of things are involved in the classes, so you have an idea about that. But in terms of preparing for the course, if you don't have a very good work-life balance currently, I would suggest trying to come up with a plan to maybe improve that before you get into honors. So, you know, getting yourself into a routine, make sure you're quite familiar with what you need to do for self-care to make sure that you're functioning at, you know, high capacity. Especially considering now with COVID and everything, things are a little bit weird, and we've had a lot of discussion in society lately around self-care. So I would definitely encourage like a lot of focus around that. Yeah, just making sure that you are walking into it expecting that it's going to be challenging, and doing what you need to do as an individual to feel comfortable with that, whether that's being ready like months in advance and already having done literature searches. Like, I know for myself, I'm an extremely slow writer. Very, very slow writer. So I wanted to walk into the program with my idea made and already having found like a bunch of articles that I'm going to be basing my literature review off of, because I knew that I wanted to get started on that right away to be able to keep to my timeline so that I wouldn't get overwhelmed and fall behind. So yeah, that's my little spiel. It's busy. It's tough.
Yeah, so I think I'll build off of what Kari just said, but I also want to say that if you are planning on doing an honors with the purpose of going to graduate school, Danny does an excellent job in the first couple of months giving you that experience. And I'm saying that in a positive way, not necessarily in a negative way, where you're able to figure out how you're going to balance all of these responsibilities. Because I think there were about 5 or 6 assignments. Like, we had to go do the thesis, we had to go watch thesis defense, we had to do a manuscript review, we had to do a grant application that was very close to what the SSHRC application looks like if you do apply for graduate school. And I think there were a few other assignments that I can't recall off the top of my head right now. On top of that, we also had to provide feedback to our partners on their proposals and have drafts ready by certain times and do presentations. And that's just the class portion of honors in the first semester. Not to overwhelm anybody, but to give everyone a realistic view of what honors is like. So I agree with Kari in the sense that I also discourage taking any additional courses unless you really, really have to in the first semester. I had taken one course in the second semester, and I found that much, much easier, because at that point you've written your lit review, you've done the REB application. If you're doing a pre-registration, you've done that already, and you're in the second phase of collecting your data. So there's a couple months of not really doing anything. You're kind of just sitting there and kind of waiting to see, you know, what happens with the data before you can like collect it or code it with whatever. With me personally, I had to also, like I had mentioned earlier today, that I had to film, edit, and basically like create another version of my video in a slideshow and video format. And again, it wasn't really something that was planned going into honors. Like, I knew I wanted to do something with virtual reality, and I thought it was going to be one experiment, and it turned into 4. So definitely plan out your days wisely. And I also encourage, if you get into honors, plan to have your assignments done a couple days before, because things are going to get in the way. And if you aim to have it done like the day of, it's going to be really stressful to get that assignment in. So that's just a little tip for anybody who, you know, gets into honors and does honors. But once you're done, writing and everything gets very easier. Like, if you're planning on writing a SSHRC application, I found it very easy applying for graduate school and writing that. It was very easy, and cutting it down and figuring out what I needed to do, how I wanted to do my search for grad school. And it was like pretty straightforward because I already learned everything I needed to do. So it is packed, but you learn a lot. And if you space everything out and you plan accordingly, you can be very successful in honors.
Okay, so I had quite a bit of work to do during that first semester. So there was, of course, the classwork, and then you have to work on your proposal. I was taking another class, and that was a relatively easy course. I was actually taking it with Kari, I think. We took one class together along with our honors, and we were struggling. But on top of that, I also had 3 part-time jobs. So I was just trying to balance all of these things together, and it was crazy. Like my head was going 1,000 miles a minute, right? But one of the assignments, and the first assignment that we actually do, is a Gantt chart. And it's to kind of schedule out what you're going to do for the semester for your particular project. And I didn't take that super seriously. So I didn't actually get everything done in the times that I scheduled to get them done. And I really, truly regret that, because I feel if I were to stick to what I had written in the Gantt chart and to really get on top of things, I wouldn't have struggled as much as I did. And so when you are making those Gantt charts in the beginning of the semester, make sure that you're actually going to stick to them. But that being said, there will be a bunch of like unforeseen circumstances that might get in the way of you completing things on time, and that's okay too. But make sure you're talking to your supervisors so they know what's going on with you, and so they can support you through that. Because a lot of the time when we're going through it, we kind of forget that we have blinders on, and we forget that other people are involved in the project as well. They can give you that support. So just make sure that you're talking to other people, you're talking to your classmates, and you're talking to your supervisor.
Okay, my turn. So yeah, like what Jackie said, I do regret not taking the Gantt chart seriously and not establishing like a firm timeline for me to do all the things I needed to do. Um, in fact, like really what like the honors program does uh, is it's a real big test of how well you can do time management of a major project on your own. And that was really challenging. Yeah, like I regret not doing a more structured approach to it before. Like I really should have like set up like regular meetings with my supervisor, weekly meetings, so we can just talk about how our project's going, what I need to do next, so I don't like have to like figure it out on my own and then tell him after the fact. That we can just be on the same page every week, even if there's no progress made. So there's that. And I also regret not having more of the prep work done, and I had to do it during the first semester on top of doing all the assignments. So by prep work, I mean just like getting my lit review sorted out and completed, um, and getting like my procedure and methods. Like I really had to figure out how my study was going to go um, during the course of the semester, and yeah, I would have preferred like to do it beforehand just to make it easier on myself. I mean, I because of coronavirus, I still probably would have thrown out what my procedure was at the end anyway. But yeah, it still would have been nice to have it all laid out in front of me, and it would have been also better for me to like explain my study to other people as well. So yeah, if you can try to do like a step-by-step process of how your study is going to go. Let's see, is there anything else to mention? Oh yeah, and also so Jackie mentioned the Gantt chart. There's also another assignment that you have to do, which is like the supervisor contract. So that's like when you have to go and talk with your supervisor about what the expectations for the project is going to be, like your policies on like communication and meetings and feedback and all that stuff. And yeah, also I would recommend that you really stick to that as well. Like yeah, like the so that you and your supervisor know exactly like how you're going to work together when it comes to work on the project.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Go on, Shaina.
I was just going to say, to talk about workload from the research perspective, it's really going to depend on what you end up choosing for your topic and the kind of design that you're doing. So for the students that I've supervised, they've pretty much all done 2 studies. And so this study can either be done in the summer, sometimes it's been done in the fall. I've also encouraged a lot of my students to do a mixed method study where they were collecting qualitative data as their first study, and qualitative analysis is a lot more time consuming than quantitative analysis, and also depends in terms of whether you're doing online or in person. So right now everything is online, but my first honors student was doing a study that was in person, and that took a really long time to try and recruit participants and to run through those participants through the study. So you really need to factor that into things. And so as was mentioned earlier, the Gantt chart is a really helpful tool to kind of plan everything. This is also where your supervisor could be helpful. I know myself, I'm very structured and timeline focused. So I always make sure that things are staying on track, and understanding that, yes, you can have a plan. You can plan your Gantt chart in September, but chances are that's not how it's going to roll out because things come up. And so it's good to have the plan, but also realize you need flexibility and to account for that flexibility, because things always take longer than you think they're going to take. And so really it can be hard to plan in advance, just how much time everything is going to take, but it will take more than you think. But making sure that you kind of update things, or just keep in mind that if this is your end goal, what needs to happen and when in order for you to make sure that you meet that end goal.
Excellent. We're going to try and go through the questions a little more quickly because we still have a Q&A. So I'm going to try and put some questions together. So what are the benefits of doing honors, and has it changed like research? Has it changed in whether or not you're going to grad school, or your perspectives on grad school?
There are definitely a lot of benefits to doing honors. I would say the number one thing that everybody will mention in terms of the program is that if you are looking to go to graduate school, it's an enormous advantage. I think there's a good number of programs. I would estimate probably the majority of them won't even accept students who have not graduated with an honors degree. So especially in psychology, like if you're looking to go into or to apply to a psychology graduate program, you're going to want an honors degree. In terms of the benefits, off the top of my head, you get great time management skills because you have to have them. So you get a lot of practice with that. It kind of preps you for the type of intensity and pressure that you might experience in graduate school. So you get like a trial run in that sense. You gain some presentation skills because there are a lot of presentations throughout. You kind of improve your ability to discuss and understand research, skills about how to speak about it in an intelligent sounding way. You familiarize yourself with statistics, lots of opportunities for networking and things to talk about while you're networking. So if you were to go off to a conference or even present your honors work at a conference, it gives you something that you can discuss with other people so that you can form relationships in that community. And of course, if you feel comfortable doing it, you can also submit your thesis for publication as well, which is also a huge resume booster for graduate school if you have any publications under your belt. So if you are doing honors, it's kind of nice to have that goal in mind, like try to make it in a way that you might be able to get this published at some point, because it will really, really help you out. In terms of changing how I felt about grad school, I think I knew ahead of time that I did want to go to grad school, which is why I joined the honors program initially. So I was quite comfortable with that. But it does teach you a lot about all of the work that research entails. So you might go through the honors program and realize, holy crap, I hate research. Like I hate this, or I find this really difficult. Or you might go through the program and think, oh, I actually kind of enjoyed that despite the challenges. It's actually something that really interests me. So it does kind of give you some more like information about yourself. Having done this program before you go into graduate school, you now have an idea about whether or not this might actually be for you.
I totally agree with Kari. On a personal level, it has helped me on so many levels, like 2000%. Like I can't even explain, how thankful I am to have gotten into the honors program and to have done such a great project and have had such a great cohort. I've gotten so much valuable feedback, and it's kind of helped me go forward in applying for graduate school. But that being said, I think it's a very common thing for someone to think, that they're going to do honors to segue into graduate school, and that might not necessarily be the case. There's people that do an honors just for developing those time management skills, or being able to develop a project and present it in front of people. And I think there are places beyond graduate school where that does come in very helpful and handy. Like if you're going in and applying for jobs, or if the project is related to something or in a field that you specifically want to work in. Like for example, if you're doing work that's related to the medical field or for law, there's people that have come out of honors and have applied for law school or other specific programs in which honors is very helpful. So I think it's not just a matter of the research aspect, but I think it's the whole idea of experiential learning that is, applied in the class and when you're doing the research project, that becomes very helpful.
Right, and just to add on to that, I also decided to apply for honors because I wanted to get into grad school, and I actually just finished my applications this last December to get in. And so it's a really big step because of all of the grad schools that I looked at in Canada. Almost all of them were asking for an honors degree, and if you didn't have an honors degree, they kind of suggested it might be a better idea not to apply. Because all of the people who are going to be applying, that might be 300, 500 students going for grad school, they probably have the qualifications. They probably have that honors degree. And so, if you want to get into grad school, this is probably a really good idea. On top of that, it did help a lot with the time management and giving you an idea of what it's going to be like. But also it kind of just it preps you for everything that you might need going forward in terms of just arranging things.
Oh, my turn. So yeah, like most people here, I would join the honors program because I was interested in going to grad school, and I thought this would help give me the skills and the major application advantage to get into grad school. Funny enough, I actually heard from someone. She's a counselor, so she did the honors program and then went on to counseling grad school, and she actually described the honors program as being harder than grad school because you have half the time that you would have in a master's degree to do your project. So yeah, so if you can get through honors, then you can probably get through grad school, is what I took from that. But yeah, even if grad school is not your thing, honors is just like a good thing that you can put on your CV, but you took on a major project from start to finish and you managed to bring it all the way to the finish line on your own. So, and all the skills that come with that previously mentioned, like time management, presentation, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, it's just a really good experience nonetheless, from what you get out of it.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add that hasn't already been said.
Excellent. We're going to be moving on to our closing questions. So, so for former students and for Shayna, for a faculty perspective, what sort of mistakes or obstacles did you face? And I know we've already talked about this, the struggles and what you had to go through for honors. But is there some advice or like a key point of advice that you would want to give to a student who's doing honors?
So I did write this in the chat already, but the first thing that pops into my head in terms of a mistake that I made was I wasn't as comfortable asking for help as I should have been. And I think I'm like that in a lot of areas of my life. So it's definitely a personal type of trait. But if you know that about yourself, that you're not very good at reaching out, try to force yourself to get familiar with doing that during this process because you will need the support. So that was a big mistake on my behalf, just trying to balance everything on my own and taking it all on and not wanting to pester my supervisor when she was in reality more than willing to help me with whatever it was that I might have needed. In terms of just listing off common mistakes that may or may not have already been mentioned, taking too long to decide on your topic or changing your topic too late into the program. As we've discussed, everything is very busy, so that can really impact you negatively if you run out of time because you're rushing due to those changes that you're making. If you're kind of settling for like an incompatible supervisor because you didn't, start asking around early enough, choosing a project. This is an interesting one, especially for our cohort, as Mario touched on before. So choosing a project that requires in-person data collection is more difficult because it requires a bit more time, and the data collection process is generally a lot slower because you usually will have to meet with these people in person to collect their data, as opposed to being online when you can kind of just get a large sample much more quickly. So for people that do want to do an in-person data collection, not beginning that early enough in the process could be a common mistake, because they might not realize how much time they actually need to be able to get the participants that they will require for their project. Choosing a project that seeks participants who are difficult to come by might also be difficult as well. So I considered a number of different topics when I was planning my project, but for one of them, I was thinking, oh, well, I really want to survey like gay men, for example, specifically. But is it going to be a lot more difficult for me to find a really large sample of gay men than it will be for me to find a really large sample of just men in general, or men and women, So like when you narrow down your kind of like sample, it will take longer to get the numbers that you need. So also something to keep in mind. People who hated their project but didn't communicate with their supervisor. So don't stick with something that you absolutely despise, because then it's going to be so much harder to finish it, and it's not going to feel as good at the end if you are hating it every step of the way. Taking too many courses, which we touched on before. Don't take 4 other courses when you're going into honors. And not discussing with your supervisor the amount of support that you will need. So sometimes the supervisor might assume that you don't require very much assistance, but you might actually need more support than they realize. So you're going to want to have those conversations ahead of time to make sure that that doesn't happen to you.
Yeah, that was really thorough, Kari. To kind of add on to all of those things, one of the main things that I probably would want to touch on, focusing and thinking about my own experiences in honors, is feasibility and communication. I think those are the 2 most important things when you go into doing an honors with your supervisor. One of the things as part of the supervisor contract is, you outline how many hours a week you're going to meet, what method are you going to be meeting with your supervisor? Is it going to be through email, phone, meeting in person? Is it going to be a mixture of stuff? What is the deadline by the time that you have to get stuff in by your supervisor, and that they have to get feedback to you? How many drafts? Like all of this stuff. With my project, it kind of blew up into 4 experiments. I think my cohort kind of understands what I'm talking about. I originally wanted to do maybe 1 in a pilot study, but because I had so many materials, I had to pilot all of these specific ones. So my advice is, in terms of feasibility, you only have a year. You have maybe a year and a bit. Like if you start, like let's say you hear back, like I heard back in like June, and I started in July, August. That I started reading, doing a lit review, doing all of that kind of stuff. So do something that's feasible and start off with something simple, because it will grow to become complicated. That's my one piece of advice, one of the main pieces. And the second one is, communicate and set clear boundaries. If you need to do something for 2 weeks and you need a specific thing from your supervisor, then make that clear. Say, this is the deadline. This is what I need. This is when I need it by. How much time do you need so I can give you enough time to review this? So again, reading through drafts and all of that stuff and getting that feedback is extremely helpful, not just from the cohort, but from your supervisor, who's also willing to review your proposal and manuscript. So don't be afraid to ask those questions. Like Kari was saying, just go and talk to your supervisor. And even in the beginning, when you're looking around to see what supervisor might be the best fit, not just the research idea is the most important thing, but also, discussing what the work relationship is going to look like. And timing and getting drafts back and communication is part of that working relationship as well, because you're going to be working with this person for a year and maybe longer. And if you don't have a work relationship that's the best fit and you really don't like what you're doing, that's really going to change your perception of research.
Yeah, I don't have much to add on either. Like they said, communication and feasibility. One of the issues that I had run into was the fact that I had such a specific group of people I was looking at. I was looking at only first and second generation Filipino Canadians, and it was extremely hard to get a group of Filipinos to agree to work with me. And that's just because in the cultural aspect, it can be, especially if you're working with certain groups, they can be very wary of what research entails. There's also the issue of I wanted to do in-person and online, but because of COVID, we could only do online. And so I ended up having a much younger group of people than I had wanted to in the beginning, because I was looking at first and second generation. So there's that kind of stuff too, is like knowing who exactly you're looking for and knowing what you have to do to contact those groups of people. So I had to like go online and blast it on Facebook and like a bunch of social media sites just to get people to come and do the work. So if you want to do a more general study, I would suggest doing a more general study, because it is very difficult to get specific groups of people to come and do your research.
My turn? Okay. Yeah, just touched on it already. So main three things is communication, feasibility, and I think also I'll add structure to that list. Yeah, structure just really helps with making sure that you're on track to accomplish everything when it's reasonable for you to do so. I mean, like reasonable in terms of workload. Yeah, communication really helps with getting the proper support that you need from your supervisor, and feasibility just, yeah, makes it way easier on yourself. So honors is already hard. There's not really any specific reason that you need to make it harder on yourself. Or actually, let me rephrase that. So, like, honors is like a marathon. So when you run your first marathon, there's no need for you to shatter a world record or do anything remotely amazing. Your job is just to make it to the finish line and prove that you can do it. And so honors is kind of the same way. You don't need to do earth-shattering, like groundbreaking research that that has a major impact on the field. You just need to be able to prove that you have the skills needed in order to finish this project. So yeah, that's why if you can, make it easy on yourself by studying a general population, making it online, because those are really, really helpful. Because the main thing is about learning how to do research and learning how to like improve your own research study. I guess like the most helpful advice that my supervisor ever gave me, it's actually pretty simple. When he told me to write up my research proposal, he told me to like tell a story with it. So that's just like to structure my literature review so that it like clearly sets up, what this major issue is, this like gap in literature that's related to a major issue, and then where your research comes in addressing that research gap, and helping solve that issue. So yeah, I thought that was really helpful.
All right. I'm actually going to disagree a little bit with something that Mario said. I wouldn't say that the honors is just about making it across the finish line. I would say, okay, that's 2,400 and 3,400 where you're doing a research project to learn about the process. By the time you're getting into honors, you do want to be picking a topic that is going to be making a contribution to the field. So it is about your contribution, not just getting through from start to finish. But in terms of advice, I got 3 things that I noted that I would give as advice. So the first one would be, if you have not found a supervisor yet, you should get on that pretty quick. And if you're not sure who you want to work with, contact multiple faculty members and just ask if you can meet with them and talk about the honors, and if they're willing to take on students, and try and get a sense of what it might be like to work with that person, because your ability to get along with this person for almost an entire year is going to be really important. So you want to make sure that you're picking somebody that you get along with, and not just because they have expertise in that area. My second piece of advice is start early if you can. So once you find out that you've gotten into the program, so if you find out in June, I would encourage you to get started in July and August and start coming up with your topic area, start reading in terms of the literature. You don't have to do this, but I would advise you to do it. I do have a student this year who we didn't even meet for the first time until September to talk at all about the project. So, you can start in September and you can still do it okay. But if you are able to start early, you are going to save yourself some work. And then my third piece of advice would be, when you are designing your study, you want to make sure that you are designing a study that answers your question, and that you're not excluding particular things because they're not as easy. So we talked about, in-person data collection or qualitative being more time consuming. But if that is more appropriate for answering the question that you want to answer, that is the method that you should be using. So that would be my advice.
Excellent. And we have one more question, and it is for you, Shaina. So what do you think makes a good student from a faculty perspective for the honors program?
I think the best quality that I would like to see in a student is someone who is a good writer. I'll be honest, I've seen a lot of really bad writing. I probably tend to see more bad writing than I see of good writing. So when I actually do have cases where I see good writing, it is just so much nicer to read. So I like students who are strong writers. Again, I also want somebody that I can work well with. I am not a person who likes to leave things to the last minute. So I personally would not work well with a student who is like that. I much prefer someone who is able to get started early and kind of make progress on things as we go along. But that is my perspective. But I think just generally students who are really passionate about doing the honors, they're focused, they're committed to doing it, they're staying on top of their project and communicating with me, even if things go sideways, and that's okay, it can happen. But someone who is able to communicate and kind of keep in touch and work together so that we can continue on with the process.
Okay, thank you all so much. That's the last of our questions. Kira, did you have your hand up? I'm not sure. I couldn't tell if that was a glitch or not.
I did, but it's okay. I think everyone did go over it, so it's all right.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, so thank you so much, David, for emceeing that, and to our wonderful panelists for answering our questions. Those were some very thorough answers. We really appreciate that. So this brings us to the second portion of our event. We have, before I go into the open Q&A and open it up to the floor, I wanted to mention a few things quickly. So we have a few links posted in the chat. One is an event survey in case you have any feedback for us, positive or negative. Please consider filling that out at the end of the event, as it will help us to improve. Additionally, we have a small resource packet with additional information and links that will be helpful if you are planning on applying and eventually completing honors. And we'll be sending that out to anyone who requests it through the link. You just need to provide us with your email. And finally, I have also posted a link to a website for KPU's Psychology Honours Planning Guide. which is a new and beneficial resource that'll kind of walk you through the steps and has a bunch of the links that you'll need when applying for honors. So please consider checking those out if any of that interests you. So I believe that's all I had to discuss. So I am going to stop the recording now.